Hey, welcome to this lesson. Okay, so this is awesome. This is where things start to get really fun. At least for me, this is one of my favorite parts of our business. Is really performing what I call alchemy, which is starting from absolutely nothing and creating money from it with advertising. I love it. So that's what we're going to be talking about over the next few lessons. And my intention here is to do this with minimal overwhelm or weirdness and just get you going. Right? And so the thing that stops your clients, the thing that stops us is trying to overanalyze things and trying to overcomplicate things, whether we do it intentionally or not. So I'm going to do everything in my power to eliminate the possibility of that happening, not because I think you have a tendency to do so, but because I believe in human nature. I think we all kind of have a tendency to do so. So what I want to do right now is show you what's called the ultimate minimum viable process. That's what MVP stands for right there on the screen, and that is something called the ODC, which stands for on-demand class. Okay, so here's the classic model, and basically an on-demand class is a new way of doing the classic model. So the classic model is an automated webinar. Right? An on-demand class is very similar, but it's different. It works like this. You've got an ad or a source of traffic. Let's just assume it's an ad, right? And you drive them to an opt-in page. They give you their name and email address, maybe phone number if you want it, where they can watch a presentation. The presentation helps them solve a problem, and it pitches a conversation with you. Right? Very, very simple. From there, you can, if you want to, send them to an application. I recommend we do some sort of filtration so you're not talking to totally non-qualified people. And from there, they can schedule. And then, of course, you close them or you don't when you talk to them. And there are lots of other little things that can go in here, like email sequences to make sure that they watch the presentation. Email sequences to make sure that they go apply if they do watch the presentation. Email sequences to drive them to another thing if they never watch the presentation. And email sequences to get them to go self-schedule if they apply but haven't scheduled. And all of that stuff is important. But what we're going to focus on in this lesson specifically, and where we're going to dedicate our time to, is this guy, right? Because the presentation is the thing that's going to get them to apply. And it's important that it's done properly. And it's easier than you think, which is cool. Now, this process, by the way, is dramatically different from a webinar, especially an automated webinar. And so when I say on demand, it means on demand. So somebody opts in and they're not choosing a time to watch your stuff later. As soon as they opt in, they literally start seeing the video. So an on-demand class is a fancy way of saying sticking a video on a web page. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple, but they opt in for it, right? Because we understand that, well, I'll explain that principle here shortly. What's cool about this method is that it's generally got a higher consumption rate. So when you do a traditional automated webinar or whatever, people talk about show-up rate, and usually it's between like 30 to 50%, with it generally speaking being around 30%. Well, everybody's going to see it if they don't have to wait. So one of the disadvantages over automated webinars, or rather one of the disadvantages of automated webinars, is that if you think of it from the user perspective, it's really, really inconvenient for them. So the user, the person who's registering, they're coming from an ad, usually on social media. They leave the Facebook, they go and they opt in for this thing. And then even if it's like, the one that starts in 15 or 5 minutes or whatever, now they got to sit around and wait. And if it's longer than that, then now they got to go check email, get the link and all of that kind of stuff. So you're not going to have nearly as much of a consumption rate. So on demand, you don't have any of that stuff. They enter the name and email address and boom, they're on the page, they're watching the thing, which means more people will see the offer. And the amount of consultations we get is going to be directly proportional, generally, to the amount of people who actually see the offer for the conversation, right? So it's kind of logical. We want people to see that. It's also different from the consumer perspective For reasons that I mentioned above, there's no waiting, they don't have to choose a time, whatever. But it's also newer. So if you have an ad that says on-demand class versus free webinar, on-demand class hasn't been used 1 billion times yet, whereas free webinar has, free masterclass has. And you know, the consumer in most markets, they know the dang thing's not live. They know the chat comments they're seeing are fake. And they're kind of jaded as a result of that. So an on-demand class, it doesn't have any of that stuff. We're not trying to pretend anything. It's just like, watch this whenever you want to. Here it is. So it's a much friendlier presentation for the consumer, and it has that differentiation, which can provide cheaper opt-ins, usually. So with a webinar, you know, the person who's opting in, they got to choose their time and all of that kind of stuff. And sometimes that can affect your conversion rates. It can actually cause you to get fewer people to register because they're like, oh, it's not immediate. I don't know. Am I going to be free tomorrow or whatever? So a lot of times the simplicity of it actually gives you cheaper opt-ins, which is great because, you know, a list is a good thing to have. And if we can get the list built cheaper rather than more expensive, that's awesome. And on top of that, it is less techy, sort of. So I'll show you during this training how to build this thing using just a couple of tools, so you don't really need anything particularly specialized. Automated webinar software can be hard. It's usually kind of clunky to set up, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. And so this is easier, in my opinion. And also, what's really, really important is an on-demand class I have found is it's better when it's shorter, which is great. You know, because webinars usually is like you got this whole thing. It's like, okay, you know, I'm going to tell my life story and blah, 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 blah. And our testing, and I'll show you like an actual funnel here in a minute, our testing is revealing that 30-minute thing is working pretty good. You know, and so that's great, right? So there are some really simple rules that aren't carved in stone. So instead of rules, maybe we'll just call these guidelines that you're free to follow if you feel like it. And here they are. Generally speaking, slides and stuff like this are better than trying to do it fancy and like record it direct to camera and get all cool and all of that kind of stuff. So my stuff I make exactly how I'm making this right now. You know, I'm just using ScreenFlow and Keynote on my Mac, and it works pretty good. I recommend that you make the offer for the free consultation or the conversation sooner rather than later, so they can either A, go ahead and take advantage of it, or B, be thinking about it while you're continuing on with the class. I'm going to give you a framework for that, by the way, and I'm going to also show you one that's working very, very well, just so you have an example. Like I said earlier, I recommend you keep it around 30 minutes. There's no need to make it forever, and if you've got 90 minutes worth of content, then you might as well make 3 of these. All right, and we'll talk about like fancy stuff later. One thing I strongly recommend is do not overteach. All right, it's so easy to do this. I'm the worst, by the way. I constantly overteach, but if we overwhelm them and overcomplicate it, we'll bore them and they won't want to talk to you. So you want to give big picture stuff, all right? And you need to understand the rule of dammits, which states that no matter how good this thing is, most people who see it are not going to apply for a conversation with you. And so therefore, you don't need to be attached to making it perfect. You just need to get it done. Because once you do one, you'll be like, oh my God, I can do 100 of these things, you know, and then you can string them together and all kinds of super cool stuff if you want to. So in order to do one, there's a super simple framework that you can follow in terms of exactly what to say. All right. So these things have 2 parts to them, and I'll walk you through both of them. And then I'll walk you through the slides of one that's working, and I'll also include the recording of the actual presentation itself here in this lesson. And the intent being that you can use what you have and just kind of bang one of these things out. All right, so first part is about 10 minutes or so, give or take. There's no solid rule here. So what you want to do is you want to start out by explaining the benefit of actually watching the presentation, right? So you don't want to bore them. You want to tell them why they should watch it. And that's really, really simple. Then you introduce yourself, and you do it in a way that's usually different than what you're used to with webinars. Then, if there is a relevant way to do this, I'm going to give you an example, you provide a contrarian statement of relief. And what that means, and I'll show you an example in a minute, is something that goes against a commonly held belief, and the commonly held belief is something that if only it wasn't true, life would be better. So like a great example would be, hey, despite what you may have heard, exercising actually makes you get fat, and ice cream causes weight loss. Now that's ridiculous, and it's not true, so I don't want you to be ridiculous and untrue, but that would be a contrarian statement of relief. I would be profoundly relieved to hear that, right? Like if there was a new study that found that, drinking Coors Banquet beer from the 16-ounce tall boy cans all day made you smart and younger and healthier, I would be, this is the greatest news ever. Now that's not true, so I'm not expecting you to say something untrue. So you'll see what I mean when I give you the example. And you may or may not have an opportunity to use this. But if you do, you use it here. And then you can always do this part. You want to state and exacerbate their problems. So we hold these trainings, these on-demand classes, we give them out for prospects who are experiencing problems they want to solve, right? So like, here's how to get more clients would imply that they have a problem, which is they're not getting enough clients. So during the statement of problems, you're really letting them know that you understand what they're going through, okay? And then you give a big reveal, which is the real reason that the problem exists. And in most cases, where you have a group of prospects who are having a similar problem, usually the problem is existing for reasons other than why they think it's existing. All right? So you do that big reveal. And I'll give you an example. So this will make a lot more sense as I give you the example. And then we make the offer. So we haven't actually taught yet, but we have proven to them that we understand what they're going through. We've given them a reason to stick around and watch. Hey, here's what we're going to be doing. And we make the offer, hey, if you need some help with what I'm about to show you, you can book a free consultation with me. So that's part one. All right. So our second part is now where we do the teaching. And this is like 20 minutes or so, give or take. There's no hard and fast rule here. But it doesn't need to be 3 years. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be fancy. Doesn't need to tell your life story. So here's how to do it. Number one, stick with big picture content. Okay, don't bog them down. Like, don't give them the technical specifics or whatever. You're going to lose them. And again, whatever you do, don't overteach. So 3 or 4 main points are fine. Okay, 27 points are bad. You want to give them the really easily understandable big picture things. And it's easy to think that in doing so, you're doing them a disservice. But when you do, you and I both, we often fail to realize that the stuff we're teaching and the stuff we help people with, it is our first language, metaphorically speaking. And when we assume that it's their first language, we go too fast and we lose them and we overwhelm them and we don't get the business, right? So it's not that your prospects are dumb. It's that you've been doing the stuff that you're good at long enough for you to be in a position to be teaching people. They haven't. So you know a lot more than you realize, and it's easy to forget what it's like to not know what you know, right? And so that's why you don't want to overteach. It's because they don't know, even the basic fundamentals often. So that's where I'm coming from with that. So that's your content chunk, and then you want to repitch again, which is just, you're not telling them how great your program is or anything. You're just pitching an offer for the conversation. And it kind of goes like this. Hey, you can have a conversation with me if you want to. Here are the benefits of having this conversation with me. If appropriate, you do a little bit of a takeaway by listing the criteria someone must have in order to talk to you. I'll give you an example of that in a minute. And then you end in a really friendly fashion, like, okay, cool. See you later. All right? So right now, as I film this for you, I'm running ads for a minimum viable process, which is an on-demand class that doesn't have any fancy stuff to it, right? It's opt-in, watch a video on a web page. I'm running social media ads on it. And here are the numbers. These are early numbers for what I'm about to show you, okay? So I have spent, as of right now, $7,136 in ad spend. The opt-ins are meh. They're okay. I'm like a little over $9 or something. per opt-in, which I'd prefer to be around $5. And I'm early in the testing phase, so hopefully that'll get better. Also, traffic is really expensive right now. I'm recording this as we're going into the election cycle, so of course, Facebook ad costs go up when major political candidates are spending billions of dollars on ads. But still, whatever. Of these 716 people that have opted in, 63 applications have been submitted. So that's people applying for the conversation. That includes like multiple applications being submitted where people are trying to funnel hack me, fake accounts and all of that stuff. I did some digging and there are 38 real applications, which is pretty good. I'll take it. Not too bad. So 38 real applications. 17 of those have booked, which is great. And they haven't all been held. So held means having the conversation. So we haven't spoken to all 17 of them yet, but we have sold 3. And that equals $13,535 in collected revenue and just around $5,000 in receivables that'll come in over a 60-day period. So we're pretty close to doubling the money already, and this has been going on for like 10 days. So I'm totally stoked with it. And like I said, there's zero fancy stuff. So it's literally opt-in, here's the video, and then there are 2 emails that say, hey, go apply. And that's the entire process. So when I say minimum viable process, like I'm not even doing anything cool yet. I will, but I haven't yet. And it's still working, which is great. And it's working because it's following this framework, right? So I want to walk you through the framework now using this example. So this is slide number 1 of the presentation. And probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and out of Keynote, so it's not going to look super professional while I'm doing this, and walk you through these slides. Not going to do the whole presentation. That'll bore you. But I'm going to, in a separate video that's included in this particular lesson here, I'm going to give you the actual, edited version of this, just so you can see it, right? So if you remember, okay, our framework here, which my eyes are so very bad, we start with the benefit of watching, okay? So here's the benefit of watching. Hey, today we're going to talk about how to get more and better clients. Okay, cool. That's the benefit of watching, very, very simple. So if we look over here again now for part 1, here we go. Now we've got the intro. This is going to be hard as I continue to go down these slides, remembering to go back to slide number 5. So just bear with me. And so here's the intro, right? So this is, I like to really do these quickly and sort of make fun of the typical intro that people do on webinars. Oh, everybody in the world, I'm the greatest person in the universe. So I always say hey, you'll see it in the recording. It's here's a mercifully short, the obligatory self-aggrandizing introduction. And then literally here's me, starting in 1999. This is stuff I do. This happens to be true. And that's it, right? So I don't think anyone cares about our statement or about our stories or any of that kind of stuff. If you got some credentials, list them, but I don't make a big deal out of it. And the reason I don't make a big deal out of it is because of my very, very strong belief in what I'm about to say here, which is my contrarian statement of relief here. So this is my contrarian statement of relief. I'm doing this, right? And I'm okay, blah, 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 here's me. I also have enough sense to know that nobody cares. You are here for you, and your prospects are no different. So secret number 1 is to make everything about them. So when I'm doing this, all right, I am being directly opposite of what they're hearing from competitors, which is you need to really have all of this authority, and you're really even if competitors don't outright say it, the prospect believes that they have to be fancy and all of that kind of stuff. And so I'm going against that belief, and it is a relief to hear because a lot of these people are not fancy, and they don't have, or at least they perceive that they don't have all of that authority. So in this little chunk here, number one, expressing what I genuinely believe to be true, and I'm also giving them that sense of relief. And so if you have the opportunity to do something similar, then do it. And if you don't, you're okay. Right? And so in the next couple of slides here, what I'm doing is basically illustrating this point, which is, hey, think of what got you here. If you would have seen an ad that says a brand new video about how fabulous and amazing Frank Kern is, you probably wouldn't be here. Instead, you're here for you. You want to learn how to get more and better clients. Let's get to it. Right? So what I've just done here is, here's what we're going to do. Here's the intro. Here's a contrarian statement of relief, which is, hey, you know what? It's never about me. It's not about you. It's about our clients. You know, it's about them. We don't have to be fancy. We just have to be helpful. And let me do that for you right now. Boom. Okay. And so now what I want to do is this next phase is I want to give them a statement of problems. And the way I do it, so I'm here, is I like to say, you know, if you're watching this, you're probably experiencing, and I call these the 4 roadblocks, right? One of these things. Now, this comes from me knowing the market. So I'm like, you're probably here because you're not selling enough. And you're not selling enough because you either don't have enough leads or you got plenty of them, but they're unqualified. And the reason you're saying they're unqualified is because you hear people say, I need to think about it. Or they say your stuff is too expensive. Or maybe you're here because you're out of time. And you know you're spending so much time on marketing and stuff that you don't have enough time to actually deal with clients or whatever, right? And so what this does is it gets them focused on the stuff that they want to fix because I'm going to help them fix it, all right? And so that is me kind of going over those problems, all right? And so that's, where are we? Slide number 5, okay? I'm explaining the problems they're facing. Not slide number 5 in the presentation, but here. Slide number 5, I'm doing it for my own reference. Slide number 5 for me, which shows the framework here, right? And so I'm giving the statement of their problems, okay? And so in doing so, I'm working up to the big reveal, all right? So the big reveal, by the way, is going to be that all the stuff that they think they got to do in the problem, the real problem is they can't, they're not closing during the conversation. That's the big reveal, all right? So here's how I sort of lead up to it. Here's all the roadblocks, right? And, you know, the first thing we got to do to overcome these roadblocks is to, secret number 2, accept reality, right? And so I'm like, our business only has 2 steps. Get people to request a conversation, sell them stuff during that conversation, and then I'm saying, hey, this is where you make your money, okay? And then I put in the obvious step 3 is to deliver our services, and I do that just so no one will take what I'm saying out of context and be like, they don't even care about helping people. You know, it's really just to keep idiots at bay. And so I'm already, incidentally, being somewhat contrarian here because very few people in the get client areas talk about like, hey, this is what's important. You know, they talk about the latest funnel or whatever, and they don't talk about this as being important because this isn't very sexy, right? And so what I want to do is now exacerbate these problems. Okay, and I don't want to do it to be a dick. I want to do it because I want to help them. Okay, so watch. And so again, I'm like in our framework, I'm still here. I'm right here, which is just talking about the problems. And so really I've talked about the problems and now I'm just going to like explain why these problems exist. Not the real reason, but explain a symptom of these problems and how they're self-perpetuating. You know, so let's come over here. Here are the big problems, right? One of the things we got to understand is that the real money isn't selling them stuff during the conversation. And then I'm asking a question that they would be asking. So I forgot who said it. I should know this. Cold, what kind of student am I of our craft of marketing, not to know who this is. But whoever it was, I'm blanking, legendary copywriter said, you know, what you want to do is enter the conversation in your prospect's mind. Well, if you know a prospect is going to have a question after you have made a statement, such as, hey, our business is really simple. If you know that internally, you know, or like consciously or subconsciously, they're going to have a question, you might as well ask that question and address it. So that's what I do here. Well, hey, but it's so simple, why is it so hard, right? And then I'm going to answer it, well, here's what happens. We end up getting caught in this cycle of doom. And all I'm doing is talking about the problems. You know, hey, you do all this work, And you got people on the phone and they're saying, I can't afford it or I need to think about it. And by the way, that's, you probably got here because of this presentation, by the way. By the way, that's what happens with people. And so now I'm directly going against what they're hearing from my competitors, because you and I need to both know that chances are you're not their first rodeo. You're not the first person they have come to learn about how to solve a problem with. Right? And so I know they've heard all this stuff. I know they're overwhelmed by this stuff. And I also know that this ain't a problem. Right? This is nice to have this, but this ain't a problem. So what I'm doing is I'm really exacerbating things now. I'm like, you're doing all this work, and you're talking to people, and they say, I can't afford it, or I need to think about it. And then, you start listening to other professionals in our space, and they're telling you need to build your authority, you need to get more leads, you get more appointments. And, that's not necessarily a bad idea. So now you end up doing all this content marketing, you're doing branding, you're doing videos, and you might make a podcast or whatever. And essentially what you're really trying to do is get more and better leads, and it's probably costing you money. And here's what it looks like. You're doing a bazillion things, and at the end of the day, you're still getting, I need to think about it or it's too expensive. So again, dude, I'm still here. Right? I'm still here. I really need them. Eben Pagan taught me this. Thank you, Eben. He said, if you can explain their problems better than they can, then you've got them. Right? And so I'm not trying to do it from a manipulative standpoint. I'm trying to do it because I firmly believe this is a cycle of doom. If they keep doing this, they're going to go out of business. They're going to quit. They're going to get overwhelmed. They're going to lose all their money. It's going to be terrible. So I'm like, oh, you're doing all this crap, and now you're working 10 times harder, and you're still getting these two main things. I need to think about it, or it's too expensive, right? And so now I've successfully led up to the big reveal, which is this. If this sounds familiar, your focus is in the wrong place. This is where you need to be focused, right? You need to be focused on selling them stuff during that conversation. What would you rather do? Have 10 conversations and sell one person, or have 10 conversations and sell 5 people? Obviously, it's the second. We don't want to get more conversations if you're closing 1 out of 10. You're going to burn yourself out. We got to fix this, right? And so that's the big reveal, which it ain't the funnel. It ain't the leads. Everybody's going to say they don't have the money. It's, you got to fix this. And so that's my big reveal. And I'm not very dramatic about it or whatever. No, I do realize it's not very sexy, right? And so I'm going to address that. Hey, don't worry. So if you know that if you do a big reveal, like, hey, the thing of the matter is, it's kale. You need to eat kale all the time. And they're like, ooh, gross. And they're going to say, ooh, gross. And you might say, but don't worry, you can also eat ice cream and pizza. I'm, obviously using a stupid example here. But if they're going to have an immediate visceral yuck reaction, address it, right? The reason nobody talks about this kind of stuff, incidentally, in the Get Clients world is because people have this visceral reaction. They're like, ooh, I don't want to do sales calls. Yuck, I hate it, right? And so I got to get rid of that immediately. Hey, don't worry, this isn't something lame. This isn't awful. I'm a terrible salesperson, hate selling. I don't have an objection handling sequence, all that kind of stuff. But now I've done the big reveal, okay? And so what we're doing now, look, I'm right here, okay? So here I am. What I want to do now is make the offer, and at the time that I make the offer, I want my button to appear, just like in a webinar, when you have the little buy button appear, or a video sales letter or whatever. I want the button to appear, they can press it to go apply to talk to me. So what I do here is I say, all right, focus is in the wrong place, yada, 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 and here's the cure, and by the way, I'm about to give you a lot of stuff, and I'm not going to take forever, but it's a pretty good amount of information. If you want any help brainstorming ideas to implement what I'm about to share with you, totally happy to help. Just click the button somewhere near this video. Hopefully it's popped up by now, and we'll set up a quick call. And so I got your back, because I know that we're about to cover a lot, and that's totally cool if you want some help with this. This is what we're here for. All right, and so I've made that offer in a super friendly way. Now, the reason this is important, so we're now coming to the conclusion of part 1 of this, by the way. I just made the offer. The reason this is important is because now, during the second half of this sucker, that button's right there staring in their face the entire time. Click here to talk to us. right? So we've got that offer in front of them a lot. We didn't take forever to get there. In mine, it pops up at 9 minutes. So it only takes 9 minutes for me to do this whole part right here in the webinar that I'm going to give you, or the on-demand class that I'm going to give you. So you'll see a recording of it here. Only takes 9 minutes for me to do this. And during the rest of this part, that button's there the entire time. All right. And so that's what I mean by making an offer. So I'm going to just do it again for you so you can see that it's just really simple. All right. So we'll start here. Well, look, if our business is simple, then why is it so hard? Well, the reason why is because people like us, in our business specifically, we get caught up in something that I call the cycle of doom. And here's how it works. Yeah, we've all been here. So we do all this work, and we spend whatever, let's say, 5 hours talking to 5 different prospects during a day, and 4 out of those 5 people say, I can't afford it, or I need to think about it. And it's really frustrating because on one hand, okay, great, you got a sale, but on the other hand, you just wasted the other 4 hours, and it's just really, really grinding. You spent over half of your day just trying to make a sale. You haven't even had time to do any work for your clients yet. And so what happens is, if you pay attention to the experts, they're going to say, oh, well, what you got to do is you need to build your authority, and you need to get more leads, and you need to get more appointments. And so that's going to make sense to you, because in many ways it's not necessarily bad advice. But what happens is now you're doing like all this other stuff, like content marketing, and you're trying to write all these articles, and now you're doing branding, and you're making a million content videos with the captions and the headline like everybody else, and now you're doing a podcast or whatever. And really all you're trying to do is get more and better leads, and you're probably spending a pretty good bit of money in the process. And here's what actually ends up happening. This is what your focus, time, and energy ends up looking like. And I literally give credit here where credit is due. This image comes from a book. Now I'm totally blanking on the name of the dang book. Oh, God dang it. It's by a guy with the last name McGowan. Shoot, I'm blanking on it, but I give credit where credit's due because this isn't my image. I say your focus, time, and energy looks like this. It's scattered everywhere. You're doing a million things at one time. It's really easy to feel overwhelmed. And what's really crazy is at the end of the day, you're still getting the same objections. So, 4 out of 5 people are still telling you, I need to think about it, or it's too expensive. And listen, here's what's going on. I can tell you, because I've done this enough, your focus is in the wrong place. If you remember our business, we've got 2 main parts when it comes to customer acquisition. We have get people to request a conversation, and then sell them stuff during that conversation. Most people are going to harp on finding new ways to get people to request a conversation. Let me tell you something. The money is in selling them stuff during that conversation. And don't worry, we're not about to go into like how to be some lame salesperson or be manipulative or be high pressure or anything even remotely like that. We're not going to do that. I hate that kind of stuff. I was a door-to-door salesperson. I hated it. I do not like talking to salespeople. In fact, the only reason I'm in business is because I was rejected so much as a door-to-door salesperson that I learned how to sell things on the internet without actually having to talk to people. That was literally what I did a search for when I went to my computer one day after having the door slammed in my face that one time where I'd finally had enough and I didn't want to do it anymore. So I just want to, calm you down there. I promise you we're not about to turn you into a cheesy salesperson. But that's what's going on. The sales conversation is usually broken. So I want to share the cure with you. And I'm going to show you a lot of cool stuff right now. And I just want you to know that at any time, if you want some help brainstorming ideas to implement what I'm about to show you, we're totally happy to help you. No problem. We're here for you. So there should be a little button somewhere near this video. Just click it and answer some questions, and we can set up a quick call, and we can go over how to really best implement what I'm about to share with you. All right, cool. So now I'm about to kind of go pretty fast, share a lot of information with you, but this really is how to solve that problem once and for all. Okay, so I'm out of like delivery mode and back into teaching mode. But you see how I did that? It wasn't, it was simple, right? Totally simple. I really wish I could remember the name of this book. It is driving me crazy. It's a pretty good book. I read almost half of it. Oh well, it'll come to me as soon as I quit recording. All right, so now what I'm going to do here is now I'm just teaching. Right? And what I'm teaching here, I got 2 slides for my teaching part, by the way. And so these 2 slides, it takes me, around 20 minutes or so to talk about these. And I'm just like, remember when I said our rules here, right up here, when I was giving you the rules, don't overteach, all right? Don't overteach it. Keep everything real simple wherever it is. I forgot where my keep everything real simple is, but it was one of the rules, right? Keep everything real simple, give like big picture stuff. That's what I'm doing here, okay? So this is just big picture stuff, right? And you know, you'll see the real thing, but I'm basically like, look, to scale a business like ours, and I'm always saying ours because my clients and I are in the same business. You know, we all get people to request a conversation and then sell them something, whether we're selling yachts or consulting or coaching or whatever. It doesn't matter, same sales process. I say, look, you know, we have to have these 4 things. We have these 4 things, we're good. And then I explain them, right? And so that's this slide here. And so you teach however you want to teach, but just notice that there is no complexity here. Number one, this is ugly. It's just 4 blue squares with some bullet points under them, right? Ain't nothing fancy about it. You know, I'm like, okay, yada, yada, yada. So here's, and you can see it in its real form. So like, so, all right, so here's what offer framework means. This is really essentially how you present your offer during that conversation. And essentially what you want to do is make sure you're doing it like this. First of all, you have to establish that they have a desired outcome. So you want to know what it is they're trying to achieve because, hey, you know what? Maybe you can't help them. And if you can't, you tell them. And you get off the horn with them and save yourself some time. But you want to know what it is they're looking to accomplish. Then you want to find out what the problem is, right? Because if they didn't have any problems, they wouldn't be talking to you. They would already have the result. So obviously there's something getting in their way. And then you want to quantify that problem. You want to get really specific, like what exactly is the problem and how much is it costing you? And so once we've done that, the idea is to flush out their objections before you ever make a pitch. So in our business, we don't really have an objection handling mechanism. We've already flushed out any objections before we ever try to even sell them anything. And then finally, you set up a system where they ask you to pitch them. So in my presentation, again, so I'm back into teaching you mode, not into webinar mode right now. I literally say, and you'll see it in the recordings, I say, hey, you know, so if they're not asking you to pitch them, you're doing it wrong. If you're doing the stuff that everybody else does, which is like, hey, what's this going to mean to you 5 years from now? You know, emotionally, what kind of effect is this having on you? Then, of course, you're not selling right. So I'm selling really against everything they've been doing. And I'm also selling towards something that would be awesome, which is to have people ask them to pitch them, which is what our offer codex does. You know, you've been through that, right? So you understand like, oh, okay, yeah, there's an exact framework for this. And finally you get them to ask you to pitch them, and they do. So it's not weird, right? And so that's the high level stuff I give there. I'm not like giving them specific things to do or say, just that, right? And I explain these other elements here, all right? And I'm not going to make you watch that part, okay? And so at the end of this, I re-pitch, okay? So if we come over here to slide number 6, I'm going to re-pitch the offer for the conversation. And now I'm going to take a little bit more time doing it. And essentially, I take more time doing it by explaining the benefits of that conversation, right? So remember, the button for, hey, book a call has been showing since here all the way to where I'm about to start pitching the call. So the button's been showing for like 10 minutes already. So this isn't a new idea. Oh, I can talk to you? Maybe I should talk to these guys. So now I'm like just reselling them on it. So my favorite transition is, hey, would you like help with this? Because think about it, you know, you just showed them some big picture stuff. It makes sense, right? And so maybe they're like, oh, this looks kind of cool, yeah. And so you say, hey, would you like some help with this? You click on the little button and book a call, and here's what we're going to do on the call. Now, what we're going to do on the call is the benefits of the call, right? So click on the little button if you do, and we'll set up a time to talk. And when we call, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at everything you got going on, and we're going to figure out where the bottlenecks are. It could be in the way you're having the conversation. It could actually be maybe the lead flow is broken, or maybe it's both of those. And essentially, we're going to figure out ways to fix them. And that could be by clearly defining exactly what your offer is and how to present that. Or maybe it's going to be, you know, helping you dial in that closing conversation. Or maybe it's going to be helping you dial in your bait, which, as you know, is the lead magnet. Or it could be maybe you need some help with scaling and growing and replacing yourself in the business. Regardless, our job is to take a look at everything that's going on, find out what's broken, and help you fix it. And we'd be delighted to help you do it. All right, so that's me explaining the benefits here. So if we come back up here, our final step is to do a takeaway if appropriate. So takeaway means you take away that ability to talk to you. And so I do it because it is, in fact, appropriate. I say, now, in all fairness, there are two slight catches. This call is free, of course. But first of all, we are bad at newbie. So if you don't have a business, then we really can't help you. I'd love to be that person that says I can turn anybody into an overnight success, but I'm not that person. However, we are great at taking people who are already doing something and just help them do it a whole lot better. So if you're just starting out and you don't really have a business, we're really not your people. But if you're already getting some clients and you just want to get more and you want to streamline the business and get better clients and charge what you're worth, we are the ones for you. No question about it. We can definitely help you. Right? And so that's a little takeaway. And it's also a little filter. Okay? So I don't want someone that doesn't have any clue what to do, no expertise of any kind, coming to me and expecting me to turn them into a person on the private jet or whatever. I'm not that person. I'll let my competitors do that and, see how that works out for them from a regulatory standpoint down the line. I'm not interested in that, right? The second thing is I put a little time pressure, which is, hey, there are only 2 people on my team that are qualified to help you. So, when the calendar's full, it's full. So go ahead and click the button and let's get started. That's a true statement, except for now I need to change it because there's 3. But there's just freshly 3, so we don't have a big giant sales team. And that's it, right? That's the whole thing. So it took me way longer to tell you how to do it than to do it. But these are literally the slides that I use for the presentation itself. So your mission is just to do one of these things right here and just use this framework. Part 1 and part 2, right? And if you get it wrong, who cares? You can film another one. But we are not going to be able to do anything until we got this, right? So without this presentation, there's not a lot of cool stuff we can do. Once you have a presentation, now we can build all kinds of fancy stuff. Like I haven't even gotten fancy with mine yet. So there's all kinds of cool things that we can do. But we got to have a thing to plug into the system. So your mission for this lesson is just to build one of these. Somewhere around 30 minutes is fine. If it's a little longer, great. If it's a little shorter, fine. All we want to do, demonstrate we can help them by actually helping them and, let that offer hang there during your presentation for as long as you can. Hey, I'm about to show you something really cool. If you want some help going over it, I'd be happy to talk to you. Click the button somewhere to book an appointment. Now, here we go. Content, content, content. Pitch again. Very, very simple. Right? So that's your mission. I'm giving you these slides just as a frame of reference. Then I'm also, within this lesson, going to include the actual version, which is only 30 minutes long, the actual version of our on-demand class that's producing the numbers that you just saw. And those numbers will only improve because I'm not doing anything cool yet, such as like following up or anything intelligent, So those are only going to get better. And yours will too. So let's get this built so we can make something awesome. All right? Cool. Get to work. I'll see you in the next lesson.